That night, I took my daughter to the airport for what I thought was just another work trip. Everything seemed normal, until my grandson, only 7 years old, grabbed my hand hard. His eyes filled with panic made me freeze. With a trembling voice, he whispered, "Grandma, let's not go back to the house. This morning I heard Mom planning something against us. Please believe me." In that instant, something inside me broke. Without asking questions, I started the car and fled with him into the darkness of the night. But before we continue, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. My name is Elena. I am 70 years old, and until that night, I thought I knew my daughter Claudia like the back of my hand. I live with her and my grandson Adrian ever since my son-in-law's death 3 years ago. A car accident that left deep scars on all of us. Especially little Adrian, who has since become an extremely observant and silent boy. That Thursday, we took Claudia to the Chicago O'Hare International Airport for a business trip to Dallas. She is a marketing manager at a large company and travels frequently. We arrived early. The terminal was relatively empty, and the freezing air from the AC made me clutch my thin coat tighter. "It will only be 3 days, Mother." Claudia smiled as she adjusted her carry-on bag. "Take good care of Adrian, and don't forget his medicines." Adrian next to me held his dinosaur backpack tightly, watching his mother with attentive eyes. He has never been one for many words, but that night he was even quieter than usual. "Everything will be fine, sweetie. We always manage right, Adrian." I tried to include my grandson in the conversation, but he just nodded silently. Claudia crouched in front of her son and fixed the hair that fell over his eyes. "Be good for Grandma. Okay, Mommy will be back soon." She kissed him on the forehead, and Adrian remained motionless, like a small statue. I watched my daughter with a full heart. Despite the hardships, she had transformed into a strong, independent woman. After losing her husband, she dove into work with even more determination, perhaps, as a way to escape the pain. I admired her resilience, even as I noticed a certain emotional distance growing between us. "I have to go," she said, looking at her watch. "Boarding starts in half an hour." We hugged briefly, a mechanical hug without much warmth, something that had become common between us lately. She kissed me on the cheek, took her suitcase, and walked toward the boarding gate. We watched her silhouette fade until it disappeared into the crowd. "Let's go, Adrian, it's getting late," I said, taking my grandson's hand. We walked through the terminal corridor towards the parking garage. Adrian didn't say a single word the entire way. His silence didn't worry me. It was just his way. Since his father's accident, he communicated more with looks and gestures than with words. The parking garage was poorly lit. Only a few yellowish lamps cast formless shadows on the concrete floor. Few cars were parked at that hour. I pressed the alarm button, and the lights of our old sedan flickered. I started walking toward the car, gently pulling Adrian by the hand. That's when I felt it. A strong pull, almost violent. Adrian had stopped suddenly and was holding my wrist so tightly that his small nails left marks on my wrinkled skin. I turned around, confused. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked, bending down to his level. Adrian's face was pale under the yellow light of the lamppost. His eyes, always attentive, were now wide with pure terror. I had never seen such an expression on his little face. A chill ran down my spine. "Grandma," he whispered so low I had to lean in to hear. "Let's not go back to the house. Please believe me." I was confused, thinking maybe he was afraid of the empty house without his mother. "Don't worry, my love. We'll be fine, just the two of us for a few days." He shook his head vigorously, squeezing my wrist even tighter. "No, Grandma. Don't go back to the house," he repeated, his voice breaking now. "This morning I heard Mom on the phone in her office. She was talking about us." My heart sped up. "What did you hear, Adrian?" He swallowed, his lips trembling slightly. He leaned even closer to my ear. "Mom said that after we fell asleep, everything was already arranged. She said, make sure there are no failures. The gas has to look like an accidental leak." My blood froze in my veins. I stood paralyzed, looking into those innocent eyes that now carried the weight of a terrible secret. "Please, Grandma." His voice was a trembling thread. "This time, believe me." That last sentence hit me like a slap. I remembered other times when Adrian tried to warn me, when he said he saw his mother hiding documents in the office. When he mentioned she had spent all night tinkering with the kitchen pipes, I always thought they were just stories from a child trying to get attention. My hands started to shake. I didn't want to believe it. It was impossible that Claudia, my own daughter, could be planning to kill us. But the terror in Adrian's eyes was too real. "Okay, honey," I whispered, stroking his pale face. "I believe you. We are not going to the house tonight." The relief in his eyes was immediate and so profound that it erased any doubt I might have had. He knew. Somehow this 7-year-old boy had uncovered a terrible plan. I stood up on trembling legs. My mind was racing. If what Adrian said was true, we couldn't just go to a hotel or a friend's house. Claudia could track my credit card. She could call our acquaintances. I got into the car with Adrian, helped him with his seatbelt, and sat at the wheel. My hands were shaking so much I could barely get the key into the ignition. "Where are we going, Grandma?" Adrian asked, his small voice breaking the tense silence. I had no idea. I looked in the rearview mirror at that worried little face and tried to sound confident. "We're going somewhere safe, honey. I just need to think for a minute." I started the engine and slowly pulled out of the parking garage. We needed time. We needed a plan. And above all, we needed to find out why my own daughter wanted us dead. I drove for almost an hour with no real destination, just getting away from our house. Adrian fell asleep in the back seat, overcome by emotional exhaustion. Occasionally I watched him in the rearview mirror, his peaceful little face a stark contrast to the terror he had shown in the garage. How could such a young child carry such a heavy secret? As I drove through the increasingly deserted city streets, my mind worked frantically trying to connect the dots. Claudia had changed in recent months. That was undeniable. More distant, more impatient, always locked in her office, making calls in a low voice. I had attributed it all to grief, to work stress, to the pressures of being a single mother. But now, remembering every detail, every strange look, every conversation interrupted when I entered the room, a sinister pattern began to form. I stopped the car at a 24-hour gas station on the outskirts of the city. We needed a plan, and I needed to think clearly. I bought a watery coffee from the convenience store and went back to the car watching Adrian, who was still asleep. That's when my cell phone vibrated in my coat pocket. Claudia's name lit up the screen. My heart leaped. Her flight should have taken off long ago. Why was she calling? With trembling hands, I answered, "Hello." "Mom." Claudia's voice sounded strangely calm. "Where are you?" "You should have been home an hour ago." I felt a chill run down my spine. How did she know we weren't home? "Oh, we decided to stop for dinner." I lied, trying to keep my voice steady. Adrian was hungry. A silence on the other end. Then, "I see. And where are you having dinner?" "At that restaurant near the shopping plaza," I answered vaguely. "Shouldn't you be on the plane?" "There was a problem with the flight," she said quickly. "It was rescheduled for early tomorrow morning. I'm coming home now." I froze. That didn't make sense. Claudia always meticulously checked flight schedules. She would never let an oversight like that happen. "Oh, what a shame," I replied, trying to sound natural. "So we'll see you at home later." "Yes, of course," she said, her voice suddenly sweet. "Don't worry about rushing. Enjoy your dinner." "I just wanted to make sure you were okay." I hung up and stared at the phone. It was a trap. She was checking if we had discovered something. Maybe she had cameras in the house. Maybe she realized Adrian had overheard her in the morning. Adrian stirred in the back seat, slowly opening his eyes. "Was that Mom?" he asked with an insight that scared me. I nodded, unable to hide the truth from those perceptive eyes. "She said the flight was canceled. She's coming home." Adrian's eyes went wide with terror. "She knows Grandma. She knows we found out." I took a deep breath, trying to control the shaking in my hands. "Adrian, I need you to tell me exactly what you heard this morning. Everything, every detail." He sat up straight, adjusting his wrinkled t-shirt. He looked much older than 7 as he began to speak. Mom woke up really early. I heard her in the hallway and thought she was making breakfast, but she went into the office and closed the door. He hesitated, looking down. I know I shouldn't have, but I went over and listened at the door. It's okay, honey. Go on. She was talking very quietly, but I managed to hear. She said, yes, they will be alone. 3 days is enough time for it to look like an accident. The gas leaked during the night. While they're sleeping, no one will suspect. Adrian paused, taking a deep breath. And then she said something about papers and about insurance money. She said, when they are out of the way, I can finally access everything. A chill ran through my body. Insurance, papers. Suddenly, it all started to make sense. 6 months ago, my late husband Robert had left the documents for a substantial life insurance policy. Claudia knew I was the main beneficiary with specific clauses that allocated a considerable portion to Adrian, which he could only access when he turned 21. Claudia was the administrator of the trust fund, but she couldn't touch the money. Not while I was alive. There was also the house that belonged to Robert and me, and after his death it passed entirely to me. Claudia lived with us, but the property was mine, a property that was increasing in value as the neighborhood grew. Adrian, I asked with a trembling voice, had you heard your mom talking about money or Grandpa's insurance before? He nodded slowly. Lots of times. She always gets really angry when she talks about it. One time she said on the phone that she was stuck because of us. Every word was like a knife in my heart. My own daughter planning to kill us for money. It was so absurd, so monstrous, that my mind resisted accepting it. But the evidence was all there. The change in her behavior, the sudden interest in financial matters, the constant questions about my will, the business trips that seemed to pop up out of nowhere, and now this fake canceled trip. She wanted to catch us off guard. She wanted to ensure we would be home sleeping when the accident happened. What are we going to do, Grandma? Adrian asked, his small voice bringing me back to reality. I looked at this extraordinary child who had sensed the danger before I did, who had saved our lives with his observation and courage. First, we're going to get even farther away, I replied, starting the car engine again. And then we're going to get proof. Proof? Adrian asked, confused. Yes, honey, proof that shows your mother is planning something terrible, something we can take to the police. Adrian nodded gravely. This was not a conversation a grandmother should be having with her grandson. It wasn't a burden a child should have to bear. But we were in this together. It was just the two of us against someone I never imagined could be an enemy. As I drove through the night, an idea began to form in my mind. A risky plan, but one that might give us the proof we needed. Adrian, I said, looking at him in the rearview mirror, do you remember Mr. Saul, the doorman from our old apartment building? He nodded. Saul was an old friend, a discreet and reliable man who had worked for decades in the building where we lived before moving to the current house. I think we need to pay him a visit, I said, heading toward the old neighborhood. It was a long shot, but at that moment, we didn't have many options. We needed a safe place to spend the night, and more importantly, we needed help to unmask Claudia before she could try again. The car clock read 11:00 p.m. when we finally arrived at the old building. My heart was pounding as I parked on the parallel street, away from the building's cameras. If Claudia was really looking for us, we couldn't leave any clues. Stay here for just a minute, Adrian, I said, turning off the engine. Grandma's going to check if Mr. Saul is on the night shift. I got out of the car and walked quickly to the lobby, staying in the shadows. The lobby was lit, and to my relief, there was Saul, his wrinkled face bent over a crossword puzzle magazine. I tapped lightly on the glass, and he looked up, confused at first, then surprised when he recognized me. Mrs. Elena. He stood up, opening the booth door. What are you doing here at this hour? Saul, forgive me for showing up like this. I spoke in a low voice, looking around nervously. But I have a serious problem. I need your help. The small employee apartment in the back of the building was simple but cozy. Saul had lived there since his wife passed away 10 years ago. It was a discreet space with a separate entrance invisible to anyone who didn't know the building well. Perfect for what we needed. A temporary hideout. Adrian was sitting at the kitchen table drinking hot chocolate that Saul had prepared. The old doorman watched us with concern, still processing the incredible story I had just told him. Mrs. Elena. He finally spoke, his deep voice breaking the silence. Are you sure about this? It's a very serious accusation against your own daughter. I sighed heavily. I know, Saul. It sounds crazy. I don't want to believe it myself, but… I looked at Adrian, who kept his eyes fixed on the cup. But I can't ignore what Adrian heard, and there are other signs that I'm only now managing to connect. Saul nodded slowly, rubbing his wrinkled chin. He had known our family for decades. He had watched Claudia grow up. He had cried at my husband's funeral. What are you planning to do, Mrs. Elena? He asked. We need proof, I replied, my mind still working on the plan I had started forming in the car. If we go to the police now with only the testimony of a 7-year-old boy and my suspicions, they won't take us seriously. Claudia is respected. She has a solid career. They would say it's just a misunderstanding, or worse, that I'm becoming senile. Saul frowned but didn't disagree. He knew I was right. And where do I fit into this story? He asked. I need to go back to the house, I said, feeling Adrian tense up beside me. Not to stay, but to look for evidence. I need to know exactly what Claudia was planning, and I need Adrian to stay here safe while I do that. No, Grandma, Adrian exclaimed, dropping the cup on the table with a thud. It's dangerous. Mom might come back. I took his small, cold hands in mine. I know, honey, but I'll be careful. I'm just going to take a quick look at her office, see if I can find any clues. I'll be in and out before she notices. Adrian shook his head, tears shining in his eyes. I don't want you to go. I don't want to be left alone. You're not going to be alone, I assured him. Mr. Saul is going to stay with you, and I promise I'll be back soon. You shouldn't go alone, Saul intervened, concern evident on his face. If what you're saying is true, it's very risky. I have no choice, I replied. If Claudia finds out we know something, she might destroy any evidence, or worse, she might try something more direct. I shivered at the thought of the possibilities. I need to act now while she still thinks we suspect nothing. Saul sighed, running a hand through his gray hair. At least let me go with you. I'll wait in the car on the corner. If you're not out in 20 minutes, I'll call the police. I nodded. It was better than going completely alone. I want to go too, Adrian insisted. No, honey, I said firmly. It's too dangerous. I need you to stay here safe. I promise I'll be back. After more insisting, Adrian finally gave in, but not before hugging me tight enough to take my breath away. Promise you'll be careful, Grandma, he whispered in my ear. Promise. I promise, I replied, kissing his forehead. Saul lent us an old cell phone, a prepaid burner phone with no registration, so we could communicate without using my phone, which Claudia could track. We arranged the codes. 1 ring and hang up meant I was okay. 2 rings meant there was trouble. After making sure Adrian was comfortable on the small sofa bed in the apartment, with strict instructions to lock the door and not open it for anyone but us, Saul and I left my heart heavy with what I was about to do. The dashboard clock read 1:20 a.m. when we stopped a block away from my house. The streets were completely deserted, just a few lampposts casting long shadows on the asphalt. I have a bad feeling about this, Mrs. Elena, Saul muttered, turning off the engine. Are you sure you want to go? I swallowed, looking at the dark silhouette of my house at the end of the street. The windows were all dark. There was no sign of Claudia's car in the driveway. I have no choice, I repeated, more to convince myself than him. 20 minutes as we agreed. If I don't come back or call the police. Saul nodded gravely. May God protect you. I got out of the car and walked quickly down the sidewalk, staying in the shadows. My heart was beating so loud I was sure anyone within yards could hear it. The house was silent when I used my key to enter through the back door. I closed it softly behind me and stood in the dark kitchen listening intently. Nothing but the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of the living room clock. I took the small flashlight I had brought and lit the way to the hallway. I needed to get to Claudia's office on the 2nd floor without making a sound. Every floorboard that creaked under my feet sounded like thunder in the silent house. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, I froze. A strange smell hung in the air, sweet and chemical at the same time. I sniffed again, trying to identify it. Was it gas? No, it was something different, something that shouldn't be there. Going up the stairs seemed to take an eternity, each step carefully calculated to avoid the steps that usually creaked. In the second-floor hallway, I stopped in front of Claudia's office door. It was locked as I expected. I pulled the bobby pin I had prepared from my pocket. Years ago, when Claudia was a teenager and would lock her bedroom door during her crises, I had learned to pick simple locks like this. I never thought I would use that skill in a situation like this. After a few tense minutes, I heard the satisfying click of the lock giving way. I pushed the door open slowly, praying the hinges wouldn't squeak. Claudia's office was impeccably organized as always, shelves with management and marketing books, a dark wood desk with a closed laptop, a leather swivel chair, nothing out of place. I closed the door behind me and began my search. The laptop was password protected, so I focused on the physical documents. I carefully opened drawers, examined folders, searched every corner for anything suspicious. It was in the third desk drawer that I found something. A red folder, different from the others, hidden under a pile of company documents. Inside, there were bank statements I had never seen before, accounts and names I didn't recognize, transfers of large sums to someone named M. Stone, and more alarming, a copy of my life insurance policy with notes in the margins about values and payment clauses. My heart raced. It was real. Everything Adrian had heard was real. My own daughter was planning. A noise downstairs interrupted my thoughts. The unmistakable sound of the front door opening. I froze, my blood turning to ice. Claudia was back. I quickly grabbed my cell phone and dialed Saul's number. 2 rings. Then I hung up. The danger signal. I immediately photographed the most compromising documents with the cell phone camera. There was no time to examine everything, but I needed proof. I put the folder back exactly as I found it and hid behind the office door, turning off the flashlight. I heard footsteps on the stairs now, slow and deliberate. It didn't sound like Claudia's hurried and firm walk. It was something more cautious. Adrenaline rushed through my veins. I was cornered. If I left the office, I would be seen. If I stayed, I would be found when Claudia came in to work in the morning. Or worse, if she decided to enter the office now. The footsteps stopped in the hallway. I could hear breathing on the other side of the door. A shadow moved under the crack of the door, blocking the weak light from the hallway. Someone was out there, standing as if listening. I held my breath, feeling the cold sweat run down my back. The doorknob began to turn slowly. The office door opened a few inches with an almost imperceptible groan. I stayed motionless, pressed against the wall behind the door, barely breathing. The darkness was my only ally now. A silhouette was cast on the office floor. It wasn't Claudia. The height was different, taller and wider. A man. The shadow stood still for a few moments, as if whoever it was were listening intently. Then Claudia's voice came from downstairs, muffled by the distance. "Marcus, is everything clear up there?" My heart stopped for a second. Marcus, the same name that appeared on the bank statements. M. Stone. "Just checking," a deep male voice replied, just a few steps from me. "The house is empty, no sign of them. I told you something was wrong." Claudia's voice sounded irritated now, closer. "They should be here. The plan was for tomorrow night after I got back from the trip. Now the timeline is all messed up." Claudia's footsteps were coming up the stairs. I was trapped between two people who were apparently planning my death. My only way out was through the office window, which overlooked a narrow ledge above the backyard. A dangerous fall for anyone, deadly for a 70-year-old woman. "I told you it was risky to involve the kid," the male voice continued, now moving away from the door toward the hallway. "Kids are unpredictable. He might have heard something." "Impossible," Claudia replied, now in the hallway. "Adrian never wakes up before 7, and I always talk in the office with the door closed. Besides, even if he did hear, who would believe a 7-year-old? A dull thud came from downstairs, followed by a muffled curse. "What was that?" Claudia asked, alarmed. "I don't know," Marcus replied. "I'll check. You keep preparing her room." The man's footsteps quickly moved away, going down the stairs. Claudia stayed in the hallway for a few more seconds. Then I heard her footsteps heading toward my room at the end of the hall. My mind raced. Her room. Preparing my room. What were they doing? And what was that noise downstairs, Saul? He must have entered the house after receiving my danger signal. My old friend trying to help me was now also in danger. I slipped out from behind the door, moving slowly so as not to make noise. Through the crack of the door, I could see the hallway was empty. Now on tiptoe, I approached the office window. I needed to get out of there and call the police. Not only was my life in danger, but also Saul's, and more importantly, Adrian's. I opened the window with extreme care, avoiding any sound. The ledge was narrower than I imagined, only about a foot wide. Below, the drop of almost 20 feet ended on the back lawn. In other times, I wouldn't even consider this option, but desperation is a powerful motivator. I put one foot out, feeling the cold, early morning air. I had to gather all my courage to swing the other leg over the window and balance precariously on the ledge. My joints protested. Arthritis is no joke at 70, but fear gave me an agility I didn't know I still possessed. Suddenly I heard raised voices downstairs, a dull thud followed by a groan. My heart tightened as I recognized Saul's voice. They had caught him. "Who else is with you, old man?" Marcus's rough voice echoed through the house. "How did you know to come in here?" I couldn't hear Saul's answer, but the sound of something heavy falling made me wince. I closed my eyes for a second, begging forgiveness from my old friend. I couldn't help him now. The best chance we had was for me to escape and get help. I started to move sideways along the ledge, inch by inch, my back pressed against the wall, fingers gripping the rough texture. Sweat ran down my face despite the cold night. There was a trellis covered in ivy at the corner of the house. If I could reach it, maybe I could use it to climb down to the yard. It was risky, but less so than jumping directly. "Claudia, I found someone," Marcus's voice shouted from inside the house. "An old man trying to get in through the back." "What? Who is he?" My daughter's voice sounded distant coming from my room. "He won't talk, but he seems to know your mother. She must be nearby." I froze on the ledge. They knew I was in the house. The search would intensify. I no longer had time for caution. I needed to act. With a burst of adrenaline, I reached the trellis and began to climb down, ignoring the pain in my joints and the scratches from the wooden stakes. I half slipped. I half descended the last few feet, landing awkwardly on the lawn with a dull thud that sent pain shooting through my left hip. There was no time for regrets. I got up staggering and ran as quietly as I could across the backyard toward the low wall that divided our property from the neighbor's house. As I slipped through the shadow of the trees, I heard the office window being violently thrown open. A flashlight beam swept the yard, almost catching me. I ducked behind a bush, holding my breath. "Someone's down there!" Marcus's voice echoed through the night. "I'm going to check. Keep the old man tied up." I climbed the wall, with difficulty falling onto the other side into the Lopez's yard, our elderly neighbors who fortunately were heavy sleepers and traveling. I ran across their lawn, skirting the house, feeling a sharp twinge in my hip with every step. When I reached the parallel street, I was already gasping for breath, but fear propelled me forward. I got as far away from the house as possible, running through the shadows, until I reached a main avenue where some bars were still open with people on the sidewalk. I took the cell phone and dialed the emergency number with trembling hands. While I waited for an answer, I checked the photos I had taken of the documents in the office. They were there, the proof we needed. "Police, what's your emergency?" The operator's calm voice sounded on the phone. "My name is Elena Gutierrez," I said, trying to control the tremor in my voice. "I need to report an attempted murder. My daughter is planning to kill me and my grandson for insurance money. She has an accomplice, and they just captured a friend of mine who tried to help me." There was a pause on the other end. I could imagine what the operator was thinking. Another paranoid old woman imagining conspiracies. "Ma'am, where are you now?" he asked, his tone professional but cautious. "On a main avenue near the 1500 block. I'm running from my house. Please, I need you to send patrol cars to 237 Bougainvillea Drive. My friend Saul is in mortal danger." "Do you have any proof of these accusations?" "I have photographed documents and a witness. My 7-year-old grandson who heard my daughter planning everything." I hesitated, then added, "I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. Please, there's no time to lose." As I spoke, a patrol car passed slowly down the avenue. I waved frantically, still with the phone to my ear. To my relief, the patrol car stopped. 2 police officers got out, approaching with cautious expressions. "The police are here," I told the operator. "I'm going to explain the situation to them." The next few minutes were a whirlwind. I quickly explained the situation to the officers, showing the photos of the documents on the cell phone. I mentioned Adrian's safe in Saul's apartment and Saul's own situation, possibly injured and held hostage in my house. Something in my urgency or the evidence I presented must have convinced the officers. One of them spoke into his radio, requesting backup, while the other helped me into the patrol car. "We're going to rescue your friend first," said the older officer, a man with a face marked by years of service. "Then we'll get your grandson. Can you give us the exact address where he is?" I provided the address of the old building and instructions to reach the employee apartment. My worry now was that Claudia and her accomplice, realizing I had escaped, might deduce where Adrian would be. Would she remember Saul and our old friendship? The patrol car sped through the nearly deserted streets at that hour of the morning. 2 other patrol cars followed us, sirens silent, only the lights flashing in the night. My heart pounded as we approached my house. "There's an entrance at the back," I explained to the officer. "The kitchen door. Saul should be on the ground floor." We stopped at a safe distance. The police asked me to wait in the patrol car while they surrounded the house. I watched, anguished, as they positioned themselves, communicating by radio. It seemed like an eternity, though it was probably only a few minutes. Then everything happened very quickly. I heard shouts of, "Police, stop!" followed by the sound of breaking glass. A door slammed violently, more shouts, a crash, and then silence. Minutes later, I saw Saul being helped out of the house by 2 officers. My old friend was limping with a visible cut on his forehead, but he was alive. I felt such immense relief that tears streamed down my face. Immediately after, Marcus came out handcuffed, escorted by 2 officers. He was a burly man with tattoos on his arms and a furious expression on his face. I waited, my heart tight, for Claudia, but she didn't appear. The older officer approached the patrol car where I was waiting. "The house is clear, ma'am, but your daughter isn't here. It seems she fled out the back when she realized we were arriving." A chill ran down my spine. "Adrian," I whispered, "we need to get to my grandson before she does." The patrol car cut through the night at full speed, siren on this time. I sat in the back seat, wringing my hands in anxiety. Beside me, Saul, with a makeshift bandage on his forehead, looked equally worried. "She didn't know where we were," he said, trying to calm me. "I didn't mention the apartment when they caught me." But I couldn't relax. I had a grim premonition growing in my chest. Claudia was smart. She knew my old friends, my old habits. If she remembered Saul, she might deduce where to look. When we arrived at the old building, my heart almost stopped. The service door leading to the employee apartment was ajar. "Stay here," the officer ordered, drawing his weapon. But I couldn't obey. I jumped out of the patrol car and ran after him, ignoring the protests. Saul followed me, limping. The hallway was dark and silent. The apartment door was closed, apparently intact. The officer knocked 3 times. "Adrian," I called, my voice trembling. "Adrian, honey, it's Grandma." "Are you there?" Silence. A silence that pierced my ears like needles. The officer tried the handle. Locked. He stepped back a bit. Then he lunged with his shoulder, breaking down the door with a crash. The apartment was dark. The officer entered first, turning on his flashlight, followed by me and Saul. He swept the small space with the beam of light, the empty kitchen, the living room with the messy sofa bed. "Adrian," I called again, panic rising in my throat. That's when I noticed something on the sofa bed, a torn piece of paper trapped under an empty glass. I picked it up with trembling hands and read the message written in a hurried scrawl. "Mom found me. She said she needs to protect me from you, that you're crazy and making up stories. I'm scared, Grandma. Help." My knees gave way. Saul caught me before I hit the floor. "She took him," I murmured, stunned. "Claudia took Adrian." The officer immediately got on the radio, reporting the kidnapping of a child. Within minutes, an operation was being mounted. A description of Claudia, her car Adrian, roadblocks on the city exits, alerts on highways and at the airport. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. Claudia was meticulous. She had been planning this for months. She certainly had escape routes prepared, maybe false documents, and she knew Adrian better than anyone. She knew exactly what to say to make him cooperate, even temporarily. I was taken to the station along with Saul, where we gave detailed statements. I showed the photos of the documents. I recounted everything Adrian had heard. I explained about the life insurance and Claudia's growing greed. The detective, a middle-aged man with deep dark circles under his eyes, listened to everything attentively. Contrary to what I feared, he didn't treat me like a confused old woman. The evidence was too strong. Especially after the statement from Marcus, the accomplice began to corroborate my story. "He's cooperating to reduce his own sentence," the detective explained. "He confirmed that your daughter hired him to simulate a gas leak that would kill you and your grandson in your sleep. He was to be paid with part of the insurance money." I felt nauseous hearing the confirmation of that macabre plan. "And what about Adrian?" I asked, my voice broken. "Do you have any leads yet?" The detective hesitated. "Not yet, but we are monitoring all exit routes from the city. Your daughter won't get far." But I wasn't so sure. The hours passed, and every minute without news increased my anguish. Sitting in the station's waiting room with an untouched cup of tea, I felt myself aging even more rapidly. Saul was by my side, silent, occasionally squeezing my hand in solidarity. His face showed worry, but also determination. "We're going to find him, Mrs. Elena," he said after a long silence. "Adrian is a smart boy. He'll find a way to leave us clues." I nodded, trying to cling to that hope. Adrian really was extraordinary. His perception and intelligence had already saved us once. Maybe they could save him now. That's when I remembered something I had overlooked, something Adrian had mentioned days ago, something about Claudia and a special place. "Wait," I said, straightening up in the chair. "I think I know where she might have taken Adrian." Saul and the officer passing through the room looked at me expectantly. 2 weeks ago, Adrian mentioned that Claudia took him to see a surprise house, a place in the country a few hours from the city. He was excited because there were animals and a lake. At the time, I thought it was just an outing. The detective was called immediately. I explained my suspicion. Claudia might have been preparing this place as a refuge where she would flee after the accident that would kill us. "Do you know where this property is?" the detective asked. "Not exactly. Adrian mentioned it was near a small town. I think the name was St. Matthew or St. Anthony, something like that. It wasn't much, but it was a lead. Investigators began checking records of recently acquired or rented properties in towns named after saints within a few hours' radius of the capital. Meanwhile, I received alarming news. Claudia's car had been found abandoned at a gas station on the highway heading west. She had probably switched vehicles. The search was getting complicated. The clock on the station wall read 5:30 a.m. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten slightly. I hadn't slept in almost 24 hours, but adrenaline and fear kept me alert. That's when my phone, which had been returned to me after forensics examined the photos, vibrated in my pocket. An unknown number. I answered with a pounding heart. "Hello, Grandma?" Adrian's voice, small and scared, made my heart leap. "Adrian, honey, where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm okay," he whispered. "Mom's sleeping now." I found her cell phone and hid to call. "You are so brave, my love," I said, trying to keep my voice calm while frantically signaling the detective, who quickly called a technician to trace the call. "Can you tell me where you are?" "It's a house in the country. It has a lake and lots of trees. We came by car, but it was a long drive and I slept a little. When I woke up, we were already here." "Do you see any sign, any name nearby?" "I can't look out the window right now. Mom will wake up." His voice trembled. "She's different, Grandma. She's saying weird things. She says you want to hurt us. Don't believe her, honey. I'm doing everything to find you." There was a silence, then a sound of movement. When Adrian spoke again, his voice was even lower. "There's a mailbox at the entrance. It says San Benito Ranch Mile Marker 142. My heart leaped. It was the lead we needed. "Adrian, you're incredible," I whispered. "Now listen carefully. Find a safe place to hide." "The police are on their way, but it might take a little while. You need to stay away from your mother, understand?" I understand. There's an old barn behind the house. I'll hide there. That's right, honey. And Adrian? I hesitated, feeling my throat tighten. I love you so much. Everything is going to be okay. I love you too, Grandma, he whispered. Then in an even lower tone, she's moving. I have to go. The call dropped. I jumped up, relaying the information to the detective. Within minutes, an operation was being organized. The state highway heading west had several ranches and farms near mile marker 142, but a place called San Benito Ranch would be easy to locate. You must stay here, the detective said, as the officers prepared. We will go get your grandson and arrest your daughter. But I couldn't just wait. Adrian was alone, facing the terror of discovering that his own mother was capable of harming him and his grandmother. He needed to see a familiar face when he was rescued. I'm going with you, I said in a tone that allowed no argument. I can wait in the patrol car far from the danger, but I need to be there for Adrian. After some resistance, the detective agreed on the condition that I remain at a safe distance until the situation was under control. Saul insisted on accompanying me despite his injuries. I promised the boy I would protect him, he said simply. Thus, at the first light of morning, we set off westward in a convoy of patrol cars. The sun was rising on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that contrasted cruelly with the darkness in my heart. During the drive, I couldn't stop thinking about what had led Claudia to this point. My sweet girl whom I had rocked in my arms, whom I had seen take her first steps, say her first words. How had she transformed into someone capable of coldly planning the death of her own mother and her own son? Money certainly was part of the answer, but there was something more, a coldness, a disconnect that I had seen growing over the years. Maybe it had started after my son-in-law's death, or maybe the signs were there long before, and I, blinded by a mother's love, didn't want to see them. These bitter reflections accompanied me throughout the journey as I watched the urban landscape gradually give way to fields and small rural properties. When we finally reached mile marker 142, my heart was in my throat. A discreet sign indicated the entrance to San Benito Ranch, a dirt road that wound through trees before disappearing around a bend. The officers stopped the patrol cars before the entrance to avoid alerting Claudia. From there, they would proceed on foot surrounding the property. "Wait here, Mrs. Elena," said the detective in a firm but kind tone. "I promise we'll bring your grandson back safely." I nodded, resigned. Saul held my hand as we watched the officers move away in tactical formation, disappearing among the trees. The minutes that followed were the longest of my life. Sitting in the patrol car, I peered out the window, trying to see something beyond the trees. The police radio crackled occasionally with coded communications that I couldn't understand. Then we heard it. A distant shout raised voices and the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. That single shot echoed in the quiet morning like thunder, making my heart stop for a second. Without thinking, I opened the patrol car door and started running down the dirt road, ignoring Saul's shouts behind me. "Mrs. Elena, come back!" But I couldn't wait. Adrian was in there, my grandson, my light, the only person who really mattered now. I ran as I hadn't run in decades, ignoring the pain in my injured hip and my gasping breath. Age seemed to have disappeared, propelled by the adrenaline of fear. Saul came limping behind me, trying to catch up. As I rounded the bend in the road, I saw the house, a simple 2-story building with a wooden porch. About 100 yards back was an old barn exactly as Adrian had described. Police officers were positioned around the property, weapons drawn. There was movement on the porch. I squinted, trying to see better, and felt my blood run cold as I recognized Claudia. She was pale, disheveled, almost unrecognizable in the fury that distorted her face. In one hand she held something that glinted in the morning sun, a gun, and with the other arm she held Adrian in front of her like a human shield. "Nobody come any closer," she screamed, her shrill voice cutting the air, "or I swear I'll shoot." The detective was positioned a few yards from the porch, partially protected by a tree. Mrs. Claudia put down the weapon and let the boy go. He spoke in a firm but calm tone. "There's no way out of here. The house is surrounded." "Don't you understand?" Claudia screamed, her voice breaking. "She stole everything from me. My father left that money for me, not for her. She never let me touch anything, always controlling, always dictating how I should live." I stood paralyzed a few yards away, hidden by the police car parked ahead. Her words hit me like daggers. Is that how she saw me? As a controller who deprived her of what was hers by right? Adrian was pale, his eyes wide with terror, but strangely calm. His eyes scanned the ground around him as if looking for an escape route. Even in this extreme situation, my grandson maintained the presence of mind that characterized him. "Your father left the money for all of us," the detective replied, trying to buy time. "I'm sure we can resolve this without anyone getting hurt." Lies. Claudia tightened her arm around Adrian. She manipulated the will. She always manipulated everything, and now she's making me look crazy, making up stories that I want to kill her. Saul finally caught up to me, gasping. He grabbed my arm, stopping me from moving forward. "Don't expose yourself," he whispered. "The police know what they're doing." But I couldn't just stand there. With every second that passed, the situation seemed more volatile. Claudia was visibly unstable, her eyes wild and darting, the hand holding the gun trembling slightly. That's when I noticed Adrian looking directly toward the barn behind the house. His eyes darted back and forth as if trying to tell me something. I followed his gaze and noticed an officer positioning himself silently behind the barn, moving to flank the house. I understood what Adrian was doing. He was consciously distracting his mother, keeping her focused on the front of the house, while the police got into position behind her. Even in this terrible situation, my 7-year-old grandson was cooperating with the police, showing a courage and intelligence that left me speechless. "Claudia," I called out, taking a step forward, ignoring Saul's desperate pull on my arm. She spun abruptly, the gun pointed in my direction. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "You," she hissed. "How did you escape? You were supposed to be dead in the fire." "There was no fire, Claudia," I replied calmly, taking another step. The police tensed but didn't interfere, realizing I was buying time. "Your plan failed because Adrian heard everything. He saved our lives." Claudia's face contorted in a mixture of rage and disbelief. She looked at Adrian, who held her gaze without flinching. "You," she whispered to her son, "you betrayed me." "He didn't betray anyone," I said, continuing to advance slowly. "He just protected the person he loves, just like I always tried to protect you." "Protect!" She laughed, a shrill, almost hysterical sound. "You suffocated me, always controlling my life, my money, my dreams. When Dad died, that money should have been mine." "The money was never the problem, Claudia," I replied, keeping my voice calm despite my racing heart. "Your father wanted you to live on your own merits, not dependent on an inheritance. He loved you. I love you." "Lies!" she screamed, the hand with the gun trembling visibly now. "If you loved me, you would have given me what was mine by right." In that moment, I realized that nothing I said would convince her. Greed and resentment had corroded her mind for years, maybe decades, transforming her into someone I barely recognized. "Let Adrian go," I pleaded now, just a few feet from the porch. "He has nothing to do with this. It's between you and me." I saw a flicker of something. Hesitation, maybe even guilt, cross Claudia's face. For a brief moment it seemed like she was considering my request. It was in that instant that Adrian acted. With a quick movement that took everyone by surprise, he bit the arm that held him and threw himself to the side, rolling across the porch. Everything happened in seconds. Claudia screamed in pain. The gun fired the shot, going wild into the air, and the police advanced from all directions. I ran the last few feet to the porch, ignoring the officer's shouts to stay back. All I could see was Adrian, huddled by the railing, trembling. I reached him at the same moment the officers subdued Claudia, forcing her to the ground and handcuffing her. She screamed and struggled, unrecognizable in her fury. I hugged Adrian with all the strength I had left, feeling his small body tremble against mine. He was alive. He was safe. "Grandma," he whispered, clinging to me. "You came." "I will always come, my love," I replied, tears finally rolling freely. "Always." Over Adrian's shoulders, my eyes met Claudia's as she was led away by the officers. For a moment, Mother and daughter looked at each other across the unbridgeable chasm that now separated us. There was no longer rage in her eyes, just a desolate emptiness. The woman I had known my daughter seemed to have completely disappeared, leaving only a shell of what she once was. And then she was gone, taken to the patrol car, and I focused entirely on Adrian, on the miracle of having him safe in my arms. The sun was now shining high in the sky, illuminating my grandson's tear-streaked face. I ran my hand through his hair, amazed at his courage. "How did you know she was planning that?" I asked softly, as we sat in the ambulance that had arrived to check on us. "How did you manage to figure out her plan?" Adrian bit his lower lip thoughtfully. "I always wake up early, Grandma. Mom thinks I sleep late, but I actually stay still in bed thinking." I smiled, stroking his face. So observant, so attentive to everything. "That morning I heard her on the phone," he continued. "She was talking differently, like she was angry but trying not to show it. I went to the hallway and listened at the office door." The paramedic finished checking Adrian's vital signs and gave us some privacy, moving away to talk to the police. She talked about the gas and about us sleeping. Adrian lowered his voice. "And she said she wanted Grandpa's money, that she was tired of waiting, that it was going to look like an accident." He looked at me, his eyes suddenly older than his age. "I knew no one would believe me if I told them. Adults never believe kids when it's something important." That last sentence broke my heart. How many times had he tried to warn me before with small observations that I had dismissed as childish imagination? "But I believed you at the airport," I said softly. A small smile lit up his face. "Yes, you believed me when it mattered." I hugged him again, feeling immense gratitude for this little being who, with his extraordinary perception, had saved us. The detective approached us, his face showing a mixture of relief and concern. "Adrian and you need to go to the hospital for a full checkup," he said. "Afterward, we'll need detailed statements, but that can wait a bit." I nodded, grateful for the sensitivity. "Claudia." I hesitated, still unable to fully process what my own daughter had become. "What will happen to her?" "She will face serious charges," the detective replied, keeping his voice low so Adrian wouldn't hear all the details. "Aggravated attempted murder, kidnapping of a minor, illegal possession of a firearm, among others. With the accomplice's testimony and the evidence you gathered, the case is quite solid." A deep sadness enveloped me. Not for the Claudia of now, this person who pointed a gun at me and used her own son as a shield, but for the girl she had been, for the daughter I had raised with so much love. "Can I see her before they take her away?" I asked, surprising even myself. The detective hesitated, assessing my condition. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I replied firmly. "I need that closure." He nodded slowly. "I'll check, but it will be brief and under supervision." I turned to Adrian, who was watching our conversation intently. "Honey, I need to talk to your mom for a minute. Will you be okay here with Mr. Saul?" Adrian hesitated, a flash of fear crossing his face. "She's not going to hurt you again, is she?" "No," I assured him. "There are police everywhere. We're safe now." Saul, who had remained discreetly by our side the whole time, stepped forward. "We'll be fine here, champ. Your grandma will be right back." Adrian nodded reluctantly, letting me go. The detective led me to one of the patrol cars parked in the shade of a tree. Claudia was sitting in the back seat, hands cuffed, her gaze lost in the void. When I approached, her eyes slowly focused on me. There was no more fury in them, just an immense weariness, and something that looked for an instant like shame. "Can I talk to her?" I asked the officer guarding her. He nodded, opening the car door but remaining attentively by my side. "Claudia," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "Why?" She held my gaze for a few seconds before looking down at the floor. "You would never understand," she muttered. "Try to explain it to me," I insisted. "I owe it to Adrian. I need to understand how you could plan to kill your own son." A spasm of pain crossed her face. I wasn't going to." She hesitated, as if realizing the absurdity of what she was about to say. "At first it was just about you. The insurance money, the house. I was drowning in debt, Mother. More than you can imagine. And Adrian, she swallowed. Marcus said we needed to include him, that 2 deaths by gas leak would be more believable than 1, that if only you died, the police would immediately suspect me. Her voice failed. I tried to argue that we could just send him away to a boarding school, something like that, but Marcus insisted it was all or nothing. And you agreed, I said, not as a question, but as a painful realization. Claudia didn't answer her silence more damning than any confession. Do you realize what you've done? What you almost did? My voice was now trembling with contained emotion. Adrian is going to grow up knowing that his own mother planned his death for money. What kind of scar will that leave on him? Tears began to stream down Claudia's face. Tears that I couldn't tell if they were from genuine remorse or just self-pity. I wasn't thinking clearly, she whispered. The debts, the pressure. It seemed like the only way out. There is always another way, I replied. You could have told me about the debts. We could have sold the house, used part of the insurance money legally. I would have helped you. You would have controlled me like you always did. She snapped back a flash of the old bitterness returning. You would have dictated how and when I could use the money. I sighed, realizing it was useless. The distorted version Claudia had of me, of our relationship, was deeply rooted in her mind. Maybe it was always there, growing silently while I believed we were close. You're going to need help, Claudia, I said finally. Not just from lawyers, but from doctors. There is something broken inside you that money could never fix. She looked at me, her face a mask of defeat. And Adrian will stay with me, I replied firmly. I will do everything in my power to help him overcome this, to help him understand that what you did does not define who he is. Claudia nodded slowly, as if that were expected. You'll be a good mother to him, she said quietly. Better than I ever would be. It was the closest thing to an awareness that I would see from her that day. The officer indicated that our time was up. I stood up, feeling strangely lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Goodbye, Claudia, I said, looking one last time at the woman my daughter had become. I hope you find peace someday. I turned my back and walked toward Adrian and Saul, who were waiting for me by the ambulance. I didn't look back as the patrol car drove away, taking Claudia to a future of trial sentences, and I hoped treatment. Adrian ran to me as soon as he saw me hugging my legs. Are you okay, Grandma? I bent down, getting to his eye level. I am, honey. And you? He nodded gravely. I'm sad but relieved. It's weird to feel both at the same time. No, my love. I smiled, moved by the emotional maturity of this extraordinary child. It's perfectly normal. In the days and weeks that followed, we faced the bureaucratic and emotional whirlwind that followed the event. Statements to the police preliminary hearings, consultations with child psychologists for Adrian. The media tried to turn our tragedy into a sensationalist circus, but we managed to maintain some privacy, thanks to the detective who protected us as much as possible. Claudia was formally charged and awaited trial in preventive detention. Her accomplice, Marcus, made a plea deal providing details that only solidified the case against her. Preliminary psychiatric evaluations suggested a severe personality disorder exacerbated by financial problems and long-standing resentments. Adrian and I temporarily moved into Saul's apartment until we could find a new house. A new beginning far from the dark memories of the old residence. Adrian's therapist said he was adapting surprisingly well considering the trauma. His resilience was remarkable, although there were nights when he woke up screaming, haunted by nightmares. On one of those nights, as I was calming him down after a particularly bad dream, Adrian asked me the question I knew would eventually come. Grandma, he said, his voice small in the darkness of the room, why did Mom want to hurt us? Didn't she love us? I sat on the edge of his bed searching for the right words. How do you explain something so complex and painful to a 7-year-old? Adrian, I began slowly. Your mom is sick. Not like when someone has the flu or a stomachache. It's a sickness that affects how she thinks and feels. It makes her see the world in a distorted way. He absorbed this in silence, his eyes reflecting the weak light from the night lamp. She loved us in her own way, I continued, but that sickness made her make terrible decisions, decisions that healthy people wouldn't make. Is she going to get better someday? He asked, his hopeful voice breaking my heart. I don't know, honey, I answered honestly. Some people with that sickness get better with treatment, others don't. What I do know is that you are safe now, and that I love you more than anything in this world. Adrian nodded, seeming to accept that explanation for now. I love you too, Grandma, he said, hugging me. Thanks for believing me. I will always believe you, I promised, kissing his forehead. Always. We stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the dim light, grandmother and grandson united by a bond that betrayal and danger had strengthened instead of broken. Eventually, Adrian fell asleep in my arms, his breathing becoming deep and regular. I watched his relaxed face in sleep, amazed at his courage, his perception, his capacity to love, despite everything. The day Adrian pulled my arm in the dark airport parking lot, begging me not to go home, he didn't just save our lives. He taught me the most important lesson of my life, that sometimes the deepest truths come from the smallest voices, and that wisdom is not a privilege of age. I was 70 years old when I learned to truly listen, and thanks to that, I now had the chance to watch my grandson grow, to help him overcome the trauma, to build a new life with him, where trust and love could flourish again. As I watched him sleep, I made a silent promise that I would spend the rest of my days honoring the courage of that little angel who, with a simple request, Grandma, believe me, had changed everything. The road ahead would be long and at times painful. There would be more nightmares, more difficult questions, more tears. But there would also be laughter, discoveries, shared joys, and above all, there would be truth between us, the most solid foundation on which to rebuild our lives. The sun was beginning to rise, sending the first golden rays through the blinds. A new day, a new beginning. I adjusted the blanket over Adrian and, careful not to wake him, quietly left the room. In the small kitchen of Saul's apartment, I made coffee and sat at the table watching the city wake up outside. I thought about all the mornings to come, about all the days Adrian and I would have together. I also thought about Claudia alone in her cell, confronting the consequences of her choices. The pain was still there. It probably always would be. But alongside it, something new was growing. Hope. Hope that one day Adrian could look back and see not only the betrayal that almost cost us our lives, but also the moment when he found his voice and his courage. Hope that together we could transform that terrible night into the beginning of something beautiful, not an end. Because in the end, that's what mattered. Not how stories begin, but how we choose to continue them. And ours, mine, and Adrian's was just in the first chapter. Now, if you like this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments what part left your jaw on the floor. Oh, and don't forget to become a member for access to exclusive videos that I don't post here. I'll be waiting for you.